It's time for another story. This time, our story is about Mog and the baby. I know some of you have got new babies and you're really kind to them, so let's see what happens with Mog, the cat, and the baby. One day, Mog was playing with Nicky. Debbie was going to school. This is Debbie, not me, this Debbie. Was going to school with Mr. Thomas. He was going to work. And Nicky had a cold. Nicky was her brother. Mog and Nicky played catch the string. They played bad dogs. Woof, woof, woof. They played tickle. And they also played ball. Rolling the ball. Suddenly they heard a noise. It was a crying noise. It was a very loud crying noise. If you've got a baby brother or sister, you might hear that loud crying noise too. Wah, 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 went the baby. Mrs. Thomas said, "Look who's here. Mrs. Clutterbug has brought her little baby. We're going to look after it while she goes shopping." The baby looked at Mog, cat, and stopped crying. It said, "Psst," instead. "It's trying to say puss," said Mrs. Thomas. "Will the baby be all right with your cat?" asked Mrs. Clutterbug. "What do you think? Do you think the baby will be all right with the cat?" "Oh, yes," said Mrs. Thomas. "Mog loves babies." But Mog and the baby, or Mog and Nicky, had to stop playing ball because the baby did not know how to play ball. The baby was eating the ball. "I've got a very good idea," said Mrs. Thomas. "Let's take the baby for a ride in the pram." Maybe they're going for their daily walk. The baby liked riding in the pram. It said, "Psst, I've got a baby in the pram too," said Nicky. Mog said nothing, but she was not happy. "Do you think that's a baby or a cat?" "Oh dear, who's put a cat in the buggy, in the pram?" But when they came back, it was lunchtime, and the baby did not want to eat his lunch. Wah, wah, wah. Look, he doesn't want to eat his lunch. He said psst instead. It said psst, and it cried. Wah, wah, wah. It cried so much that poor Mog did not want to eat her lunch either. I think it was too noisy. Mog went to her basket. Can you see there? She doesn't look very happy. She's in her basket. She sat in her basket and she tried to think of other things while Mrs. Thomas and Nicky cleared the dishes. And the baby found a dish to clear too. Do you think the baby is eating the cat's food? Oh dear. "Look what it's done," said Nicky. "Oh dear," said Mrs. Thomas. "Perhaps this baby would like a rest. Maybe it's time for the baby to have a little rest and a sleep. Does your baby have a sleep in the day?" But the baby did not want to rest. Wah, wah, wah. It said, and it cried. "It wants Mog," said Mrs. Thomas. Will Mog be all right, with the baby, said Nicky. Oh, yes, said Mrs. Thomas. Mog loves babies. Mog sat in her basket, and the baby stopped crying. It was nice and quiet. Shh. Because the baby stopped crying, it was so quiet that Mog fell asleep. She had a dream. She had a lovely dream. It was a dream about babies. So there's Mog. She was dreaming about all these babies. Do you know what a baby cat is called? That's right, it's called a kitten. Suddenly she woke up. Mog thought, this baby is everywhere. She thought, it's getting out. Oh, I'm getting out. Sorry. Mog ran across the road, but the baby was coming after her. Oh dear. And that bad dog was waiting on the other side. Woof, woof, woof. And there was a car coming. Vroom. There's my baby, shouted Mrs. Clutterbug. There's Mog, shouted Debbie. And there's only one way to go, thought Mog, and she jumped. She jumped away from the dog. She jumped away from the car. She jumped away from the baby, and the baby flew into the air and came down on the pavement, and it said, Mrs. Thomas stopped the car just in time. Stop! Oh dear, look at the picture. What's happened? The cat has pushed the baby out of the way. My baby! Oh, my baby! It's a silly baby, said Nicky. You shouldn't have run into the road. Mog saved it, said Debbie. She is a brave cat, said Nicky. She is the bravest cat in the whole wide world. She is a baby-saving cat, and she should get a reward. They all went to get Mog a reward. It was a very big reward. It was a reward from Mrs. Clutterbug. I wonder what the reward will be. Shall we have a look? Mog had saved the baby from being run over, said Mrs. Clutterbug. I told you, said Mrs. Thomas. Mog loves babies. Isn't that a nice picture? I wonder what the cat's going to have for his tea. Looks like a big fish. And that was the end of the story. Mog's peaceful day was shattered when a baby came to visit. Mog loves babies, said Mrs. Thomas, but Mog isn't quite so sure. The end.